Hey DIYers, did you know that you need to vibrate the concrete when you're poured? Do you even know what a concrete vibrator is? Or as I commonly call it, a stinger? Well, you're in luck. A concrete vibrator is just what it says. You put it in there and it vibrates the concrete. It helps get the air bubbles out and brings them to the top and gets it to lay down flat and smooth. Now what if you don't do it? Well, you could do that, but if you got a bunch of air pockets in there, it's going to decrease the strength of the concrete. So let's talk about the concrete first. Now, when you're using the stinger, you don't want to make it too wet, and you definitely don't want to make it too dry. If you make it too wet and soupy, like in my case, I'm using sackcrete here, and it's high strength, and it's supposed to be about 4,000 pounds. If you make it too wet, one, it decreases the strength, but two, it winds up separating out your aggregate, meaning your stone and your sand wind up separating out as you vibrate it, and then you wind up having something that looks like this when you take your forms off, and you can see that you just had it too wet. On the other hand, if you have it too dry, the vibrator, there's not enough moisture in there, and the vibrator can't get it to all settle down and get the air pockets out, and when you take your forms off, you're gonna have pocket holes like you have here. How do you know how wet to get it? Well, for me, when I'm mixing this up, I don't want any standing water in the mix when I get it done. If I got any standing water, it's a little too wet. So what I got here is just about right. And two, I want it wet enough to go through, because I got rebar down in these concrete post holes, and I want the concrete to go down in through there and hit to the bottom. If I have it too dry, it sits at the top and it won't fall down in there. It takes twice as long to do it, and you don't get as good a job. Now, before any of you go getting crazy in the comments, I know most people dry pack their fence posts, but one, they don't have rebar and wire mesh in theirs like I do, and two, I'm pouring mine above ground level because I'm gonna wind up pouring a curb around the whole fence. They don't. They pour theirs just to ground level, so dry packing's fine for them, but that isn't gonna work for this. This sackcrete is different than what you get from, say, the trucks. And that's different than what you see when you see people putting it through a concrete pumper and it's coming out looking like water. Let's talk about the concrete pumpers. Those have to be loose enough so it'll pump 300 feet, 400 feet, or even more to get it where it needs to go. It's the same rock and sand in Portland. It's just it's got more Portland and more sand in it, so you don't lose your strength when you get it really wet and soupy. Now, the stuff in the truck versus the sackcrete, the difference is that the rock concrete that comes out of the truck is much bigger than what you have in this sackcrete. There's kind of the difference. If you want to sound really professional, like you know what you're doing, when you order a concrete truck full of cement and they get there, you need to ask them, what slump is it? What does that mean? Slump is a measurement of how wet it is. And so basically what it is it's an aluminum plate that has a cone that you put on it, and you fill it up with the concrete, and you take an aluminum rod, move it up and down in there to get the air bubbles out and get it to settle down, and then you pull the cone off real slow, flip this lid up, and take a measurement from the bottom of that lid to where your concrete fell to. And that measurement is your slump. You want at least a 4-inch slump. Probably the best for working time would be no more than a 6-inch slump. That's pretty wet. I've got here is probably close to a 6-inch slump. And what I'm gonna do is shovel it into this hole. Each one of these post holes takes a little over 4 bags. I got about 3 in here. I'm gonna put it in there, put the stinger in there and show you how to use it. There is a right and a wrong way to do it, and kind of let you see what it does. Now, as you see me shoveling this in, you're gonna see me shovel it in on 3 sides so that I get fill all the way around. Okay, it's not quite full enough for you to see anything, so I'm gonna mix up another bag, fill it up, then we'll come back and I'll show you the stinger. All right, this last mix is a little drier than the first one, and I do that on purpose. And you're gonna wanna do that because when you use this vibrator or stinger, as I call it, it's gonna pull moisture and water up. And so by the time you get it all done and ready to float, it's gonna be really wet. And so if you got your last set that you put in there kind of dry, it'll help eat up some of that moisture and won't be so soupy. Now the stinger I'm using here, I actually bought myself off of Amazon, and I'll leave a link in case you want to check it out. But you can rent them, and I did for the first set of posts. The only problem is the head that come on it is really big, and it made it difficult to get down into them posts to sting them. And two, as many times as I'm gonna have to use this and rent it, it was cheaper for me to buy this than to keep renting it every time, because I got this for like $260, $270, something like that. It's got a really long, like 15, 16-foot vibrating line. It's got this big head. This one's, I think, 1 7/8 inches. I wanted a little smaller, but they didn't come with them. You can buy extra heads that are smaller to fit on them. I just didn't want to mess with that. Now, what should you look for in a concrete vibrator, or stinger as I keep calling it? One, you want probably a pretty long cord like I've got. They make them where they're real short, 4 and 6 foot. Those are too short. Get a long one. It is heavy, it is cumbersome, but believe me, you'll be happy you got a longer one. Two, how much does it vibrate? They all don't vibrate the same. Those little bitty ones, those cordless ones you put to your drill that are 4 foot, those things barely hum more than a pager. You need one that's gonna give you a ton of vibration, and that's what this one does. I don't remember, I'll look and check on the website what it is. You want it to have a lot of vibration in order to do the job. If it doesn't, it's not going to do anything. It's going to be like sticking a pager down in there and hoping it works. And 3, you want an electric one. Don't get a battery operated, like I said. Get an electric motor that the biggest that'll come with it. You'll be happy you did. How do you do this? When you do this, you want to put it in and go all the way to the bottom. You don't want to do it slow to the bottom. You want to just put it in there and go. Turn it on and put it in there and go. And what you'll see is the concrete will drop around it, because that air bubbles are popping and getting to come up to the surface. And when you get it down to the bottom, you leave it there for a little bit to kind of vibrate around, and then you pull it up slowly. And that way, as you pull it up, it vibrates the hole that's left behind from the head of this. And that way, by the time you get to the top, it's all filled in. And you also want to try and do multiple spots, because just because you sting on this side doesn't mean it's going to get it all the way around onto that side. I am thrilled with this one. It did just as good as the one I rented at the rental store. Actually, it did better because it had a smaller head on it and it was easier to get down in there and do the job. I am very pleased with it. So all this is done. We're gonna let this sit overnight. We're gonna come back in the morning, take the forms off, and we'll see how well we did. All right, it's the next day. You can see I got all the braces pulled off and the forms undone, and it did a really good job. I'm pretty happy. Now the concrete's still green, it's not cured, and you can tell that because of how dark gray it is, whereas when it's more cured or fully cured, it'll have that more whitish gray color. But I'm pretty happy. I pulled the forms off. I got a few little air bubbles you can see here and here, but it's really hard to get it 100%. You can get it pretty close. You know, you got to be careful. You got to weigh doing too much and causing everything to separate out versus doing it just enough and being fine with a few air bubbles. And you can see there's a few little air bubbles here and there, and it's kind of busted out in some places on the corners, and I got one down there a little bit on the top when I pulled the forms, and that's because it is so green. Now you'll notice this water down in here. I've been hosing this off. The best thing you can do for this concrete so it doesn't cure too fast is to water it down 4, 5, 6 times in the day, and that water helps slow it down and cause it to cure nice and slow, and you'll get your full strength. If you let it cure too fast, you'll lose some of your strength and it'll become brittle. On this one here, you might think that that's all air bubbles, but actually what it is when I pulled the form off, it pulled some of the finish, and you got kind of a dippled look there that makes it look like you got a bunch of air bubbles, but you don't. But like right here and here and here is. I'm very happy. That vibrator I bought off of Amazon did a really good job. Here's another one. I hope you can see. You can see kind of the sand showing through there. And again, that's what you got to weigh out. If you vibrate it too much, you're going to cause your aggregate to separate out. It's probably the worst one as far as how many air bubbles I didn't get out. The other thing you notice is you don't see any pore lines. If there's a pore line, you'd see like a little line or a crack going through where the two different mixes met, but you don't see that. So I'm gonna wait till tomorrow and I'll fix all these little air pocket voids and the rough spots. And if you want to know how I'm going to go about doing that, click on this link here where there's a playlist of this whole fence building project, where I not only show you how I patch and fix this, but I go into the details of why and how I did this fence build like I did. And I hope this inspires you to get out there and do your own renovations and repairs, because if you do, you'll become your own DIY master. So until next time, happy DIYing.